Hi guys, my name's Heidi Gan. You're gonna introduce it. Sorry, I'm
I've done a
Andy.
face swap before.
I'm Andy Donaldson.
I'm Heidi Gan.
You got there at the end. And we're just here to run through a couple of questions that you guys have posted to us about the Rottnest Channel Swim. So right, we'll get things kicked off. One of the questions that was asked was, what is the best sunscreen protection that we use for the swim?
It's for me quite a personal preference. So I like to use a non-greasy sunscreen 50 plus. Most of them are sports types, which are pretty good in terms of not being too greasy and staying on, water resistant, obviously, for as long as possible. But on my face, I liked to use zinc because it didn't mix and melt and seep into my goggles and then sting my eyes, which is a major consideration in a race like this. So I use zinc. I always found the zinc stuck to my cap pretty well, so then it wouldn't fall off, which was a thing for me. Sunscreen tends to be slippery, so I found the caps would slip off the sunscreen. So yeah, zinc for me, not any particular brand, and just a non-greasy, water resistant sunblock.
Yeah, I mean you're going to be potentially out there for quite a long time under the boiling sun, so you do want to be sun smart. Something like sunblock, you can even use it to highlight your arm and
stuff like that,
so
zinc.
that
you different colours of zinc and things like
be
that.
spotted by your paddler and whatnot.
Or just look fabulous in
fabulous as well.
Zinc.
Another question was, what do you use for chafing prevention?
Chafing prevention for me, I did use Vaseline, but I also used lanolin, more for keeping warm, but that stuff does ruin your suit, so it's a personal preference. I did use Vaseline petroleum jelly, just in the main points. So for me, the main points were here and then under the arms
and around the front of your
just
where there's contact with if you're wearing a full body suit.
They were the main points for me.
There's things like ocean grease that you can use. Vaseline, it is unfortunately going to get on your suit. But the flip side of that is some really uncomfortable.
It can be quite debilitating to get really bad chafing during the race, because also you're in salt water. So I mean, I've done races where I've been cut so badly you're bleeding, and then you've got salt getting into the wound, and it can actually change your stroke, because then you're trying to not irritate it, and then that can be in turn quite bad for your general body, because your body position's changing and your technique's changing.
You're using different muscles, and you start tightening up, and
so it's such a small thing, but it can actually have quite an implication. So whatever works for you.
If you do get chafing, one of the things I've used in the past is pawpaw cream to help with the recovery.
And that's after.
If you do have chafing, and minimise the chance of scars and things like that.
Agree.
Big one that was asked is nutrition. So we'll try break this down into different things, like what we're taking, the intervals, temperatures of the feeds. There's certain questions around, if you get a dry throat, what can you do, and all these different things. So we'll try and cover all of that. Do you want to have a stab at this? What about during the swim?
All right. So during the swim, my background is 10K open water races. So I've been, prior to doing the Rottnest swim solo, had been doing Olympic level open water swims for quite some time. So my nutrition plan was very specific to what I wanted, what I liked, and had been practicing for many years across many different races, but always a 10K race. So I was very specific about what I liked. The whole point about race day nutrition is not to be a source of fuel to rely on, but to be something that offsets a blowout, basically. So everything you do up to race day should be, well-rounded nutrition. So when you get to the start line, you are ready to go, your body can swim there. Or everything that you take on the race day itself is basically offsetting deterioration. So the key components of race day nutrition are things that are easy to digest and taste good that you like. It's actually really important.
Yeah.
And things that you've practiced with that hit the main key components. For me, that was carbohydrates. I used gels. Electrolytes are really important because
you're mixing that in water, yeah?
Yep, mixing that in water. And the reason you have the electrolyte component is because that helps your absorption of the hydration aspect of your fluids, basically. It's not just the volume of water, it's actually the quality of what you're taking in. And then throughout various points in the race, I'd add other bits and pieces. Like, for example, you might add some magnesium, you might add some caffeine, you might add other things at different points in the race. But the base premise is to keep it simple, keep it easy to digest. For me, like I said, that was the gels, and to keep it interesting because it's something you probably don't recognise without having done the Rottnest swim before. But when you're doing the swim, the feeds are the only things that are really keeping you engaged because I fed once every 20 minutes on routine for the entirety of the race. So I knew after the third feed that was an hour.
Yeah.
And it's actually something you look forward to because during the race you can sort of lose your mind, lose your focus. If you get hypothermic, your mind can start to wander. So it's actually a good way to keep engaged. And so I would do something like my first 2 feeds in a 1 hour block would be lemon. It's like lemon, and the third one would be like strawberry flavoured. So you have something to look forward to, and you can also use that as a way to keep you in check as to how far into the race you're going. Yeah, and it's fun. And it's actually the only thing that might be fun during the race if you're really struggling. You know, what's my next feed?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you look forward to that next feed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, nutrition is a very personal thing. Everyone's got their own approach, and everyone's, it can be different for everyone. For me, I think there's some general rules of thumb to try aim for about 100 grams of carbs per hour. I think that's the sort of sweet spot. I'll try and mix my feeds so that got something to look forward to. It avoids taste fatigue. Mixing them up allows you to access different types of sugars so that you're not pounding the gut with the same type of sugar, and it allows it to pass through a lot easier. Intervals I was doing every 15 minutes. I mean, it's different for different people. I think one way that you might be able to find that out is something called a fluid loss test, where you basically weigh yourself before a 60-minute workout at pace. In that 60 minutes, you don't pee or take on any fluids, and you weigh yourself afterwards and just see how much you've actually sweated, and that can provide a bit of guidance as to how much weight you're actually losing through sweat. Obviously, you want to replicate those conditions to race day as much as possible, but that can give you some guidance. I mean, I was doing every 15 minutes with 200 mils of liquids, all at room temperature, because it passes through the gut a lot easier when it's at room temperature. It's not chilled, even though it might be quite refreshing on a day. If it is chilled, it might lower your body temperature down, which you don't want. Unless it's a very stinking hot day, then it might be something to consider. But I try to organize it all in advance. I write down a sort of plan, a feed plan. So I've got mine here, and it basically lists out what I'm doing every 15 minutes, or I think this one might be 20. This is what I use for the English channel, and the ingredients for it. So some people like to prepare them, the day before and take them onto the boat. Some people prepare them as they're going.
It's really a personal preference.
It's really a personal preference, but if you can put all of these onto like a little A4 piece of paper and give that to your team, because it is quite hard to communicate together on the day. Make it simple for them as possible.
Yeah.
Like, write them out. Like you can even like order them.
Yeah,
number
and
them
that's
1
what
to
I
20,
did. I had say 30 bottles or however many fit into the time that I had planned to be swimming. plus a few more for extras in case there's you're delayed or there's a reason that you haven't met your benchmark time. And I would just label them on the lids 1, 2, 3, 4 straight through. So it's really easy for your paddler and your crew to feed you and know what you're getting at the right time.
Yeah, perfect. Any other quick tips on like spares and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think always have spares. Always plan for spares. I know, Andy, you planned for spares, and even then you got
ran out.
Andy ran out during this race because you wanted more. You planned for once every 15 minutes, and there was a certain point in the race where you were struggling a bit, and you just double fed, which was fine. But you probably had plans for that. And so towards the end, we didn't tell Andy this at the time, but we were giving Andy like our personal Powerade because you had run out of your drinks. So we were like lining up our drinks for you. So always plan for extra because you don't know what will happen all the time. And also play around with the drinks because you might want to incorporate solid food, and some people do. That might be a banana, that might be a white bread, jam sandwich. We've heard all sorts of varieties of people.
Baked beans.
I've got a whole bunch of friends who've won the Rottnest Swim who've done a whole bunch of different things.
I wouldn't use that, but
one of them that was always front of mind for me, not that I would ever do it, was one of our friends would get a can of baked beans and hot water, and his crew would like mash it up, and he'd just chug it down and keep going.
He might be watching this, so
I'm not going to comment this. I mean, it worked for him, right? Like he won. So it's what works for you is the point.
Well, and that's it. Like you make sure that whatever you do, I mean, there's all these different things that you can do: flat coke, staminade, water and gels, hydrolyte tablets,
jelly, bananas, if you want that kind of
but
thing.
Practice. Make sure that you've practiced with them before the actual day, because some people don't, and it can be quite.
It can be like
your body might not used to it. Yeah.
People don't. I think people don't plan for their nutrition not going well, but you have to remember that your body is in a situation that you've probably not put it in before or haven't regularly put it in. So it could be very cold. How does your body react with food when it's very cold? You could be under a whole lot of stress because you are getting stung a lot. How does your body feel in that situation? Or you're getting roasted and sunburnt and you're hot and you're fatigued. What does your body need? And you can't test all those scenarios before the race, but what you can do is make sure that your body is comfortable already with your feed, so that in those stressful situations your body is already tuned to taking in whatever it is.
So practice with your feeds during an intense session so that you know that your body and your stomach can handle it. That's an easy one that you can do. But talking about issues that might crop up in the day, so one of you guys asked about what happens if you get like a dry throat. Or that kind of burn in your throat. An easy one, just put a bit of mouthwash in a bottle and gargle that, obviously spit it out. That can help, so just shout up to the guys or schedule it into your feed plan. Obviously you need to know that that's coming to you, so you don't just go down and drink it. If you're cold or lacking energy, maybe adding extra sugar to a feed, or extra, if you're using staminade or something like that, add a little bit of extra powder to the next feed or the following feeds. If you're too full, dropping the feed volume just ever so slightly, maybe like 25 mils. If you're vomiting, maintain the feed volume but reduce the sugar or the powder. Often it's, you're actually, too much sugar in the system can really mix with those blood sugar levels.
But if you're vomiting, you do need to try and get some sort of sustenance back in because you're losing a lot of fluid. So while you might not want to, it's really important, obviously, to try and stay hydrated and fueled to the extent you can. And that might be not taking in gels, that might just be taking in Powerade, for example, something that whatever you can tolerate on the day.
Yeah, that's it. Find something that you can tolerate. If you're cramping, obviously you want the feeds to kind of sustain you and give you the electrolytes so that you avoid it. But if you do get to that stage, there are things out there such as like Cramp Fix that you can buy. it's different for everyone. I wasn't particularly a fan of it, but you gargle that essentially. It's like tastes like pickle juice, and spit that out, and it sends some signals to your brain that help stave off the cramping sensation. But
I've been quite lucky. I've never had a situation where I've cramped in a race, so it's not something I'm familiar with. Maybe I'm lucky.
I've cramped.
Yeah, I know you've cramped. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
So I'm not very useful with that one.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't come to that for you guys. And an important one, if you're not peeing, I mean, if you don't pee, it's actually quite dangerous. So make sure that you try, make sure that you can pee, stop, relax, pee, or have honey and tea, or add a little bit more volume to your feeds. But it is
honey and tea make you pee.
That's what I've read. I mean, I haven't had this situation happen to me, but I know of people that haven't peed and have had to go to hospital. So it's obviously something that you want to avoid. I think it's a SIP, I think it's called. So yeah, obviously want to avoid that. Just quickly before we move on, carb loading. It's something that you can do in the week running up to it. It's not just the night before. It's getting the carbs into the system to get glycogen stored into your body, and it's more not about the volume, but it's more about what you're eating. The brain relies on glycogen. When you run out of that, that's when you hit the wall. So the carb load is really there to set you up. The way I see it, it helps set you up for the first half of the swim, and then the feeds that you're taking during the swim will help you with the second half of your marathon swim.
I also just wouldn't eat anything extravagant that you haven't eaten before, right? Like if you the night before the race you want to eat pasta, I wouldn't have like a creamy carbonara if you've never done a race on carbonara before, or you've never made it before. You're eating at a restaurant that you have never eaten at before. Just keep it simple, but focus on good foods. It's pretty basic stuff. I think people can overcomplicate nutrition. I would say just do what you do regularly and add a few more carbohydrate sources into your meals in the last week if you can.
Yeah, perfect. One of you guys asked about post-swim recovery for the body. Obviously with each swim is different. Each person has different needs, but the sort of general rule of thumb, refuel immediately. So like get the protein into the system. No need to carb load anymore after.
I mean, I actually think you should you should have a balanced meal after, because you do need to replenish the carbohydrates that you've lost. So if you're like we would do this in elite swimming all the time, because often when you're on a World Cup circuit you only have a week to recover for your next 10k, but even at World Champs actually we'd do the 5k one day, and then you'd have only a few days before a 10k. Or quite often you do back-to-backs, like nationals used to be 10k and then a 5k the next day and a relay the day before or something like that. So
we're not getting on the beers, basically. Yeah, of course we would never do that after Rottnest.
I think Rottnest is a little bit different at the elite level. If you actually had a reason to recover, it would be a very different strategy to my Rottnest recovery strategy, which was not very good.
Replenish get a protein shake straight away. Use the massage tent that's there. The guys are really good. Replenish lost electrolytes. Hydrate. It's usually a very hot day out there, so very important. Light activity just to make sure that the muscles are still moving. Like this is in the days afterwards, and go for your massages, see your sports chiro.
Go for a swim.
Go for a swim.
Yeah, that's actually the best way to recover, is to keep your body doing what it's doing.
Swim back to there.
I wouldn't say that.
Would you ever do that?
No.
No. Straight
Maybe
off.
one day, but not right now.
Never say never. All right, awesome. Why is that? Oh, that's frozen.
It's just a mouse.
There we go.
There you go.
And then things like sleep, rest, recover, essentially. There's been a question about how do you taper, and I think from what I would say, I'll just jump in here. Don't do too many things different from what you're used to doing. So, Heidi used the example with food. Don't just start eating things that you would never eat before, or in your normal routine. If you don't stretch after every training session, I wouldn't start incorporating a 45-minute stretch after every swim just because you're in taper mode. Think about just maintaining the routine. Keep the early morning swims because on race day you're going to be starting early. Don't introduce new things like sleeping tablets or things that you haven't been using already, because it's just going to mess things up. And
the key to taper is to keep doing what you're doing. Don't introduce new things and slowly take off the load.
Yeah.
But just relaxed. Relaxed about the whole thing.
Yeah. If you're working in a swimming squad or have a coach, ideally they're going to know what you eat.
Taper changes. The amount of taper required changes with the athlete as well.
Yeah.
So, I know myself personally. During my Olympic career, I performed better off a drop taper traditionally. So even at the Olympics, my taper was probably realistically only a 7, maximum 10-day taper. Other events I would do a 3-day drop taper.
Yeah.
Other people required a full 2-week taper or a 3-week taper.
So when you say a drop taper, just to explain, so that's just
3 days. So maintain high volume and then just come down. So I would do say 9K sessions, and then in the last 3 days I dropped to a 5-4-3 race.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's a big drop. That worked for me. Other people tended to do a 2-week taper, which was more like 8K, and then slowly 7, 7.5, 7, 6.5, 6 down. Stay at 6 for a bit, so slowly come down. It just depends on the person.
Well, and that's it. It's just depending on the person, depending on how much training you're doing, and the mileage you're covering. So you and your coach are really in the best position to make a judgment call on that. I think with how you feel in the water. Even if you get on to race day and you're not feeling that great, or feeling a little bit sluggish, I mean, I know that's happened for me quite a number of times. You've got plenty of time to kind of settle into your swimming and flush out those cobwebs.
And even if you don't, and you never feel good about the whole race, you just have to swim with what you've got at the day on the day. And I think people place probably too great a focus on feeling really good before the race. And I know people that will do a test swim, a week out or 2 weeks out, and they'll go, "Oh, I'm really disappointed in how I race." And I just say, well, you don't want to swim fast now. You want to swim fast on race day. And also, it's okay to not feel good because you can't control that. So that might be your body adjusting to the taper. I quite often didn't feel good when I started, and you swim into the race.
Yeah.
And even if you don't swim into the race, there's nothing you can do at that stage anyway.
Well, and that's it. You're doing the best with what you can on the day. You've ideally done all of the preparation beforehand, so you can't change that. Like I had a swim last year. It was the Derwent River swim, and that was a 35k swim. Started at 2:30 a.m. and I had not a single minute of sleep the night before, and I was stressing. I couldn't go to the toilet before, which blew out my routine.
You have a set routine.
But I had an absolutely incredible swim. So these things happen. It's great to have a routine and to be able to plan and things, but it doesn't always it doesn't always come together, and you have to be adaptable and really just
relax. The joy of open water swimming is that nothing is
nothing's a given. Nothing's a given. So you're
nothing's
out there,
ever going to be the same.
And ultimately, if you've given your best effort with whatever you've been given, then you can't really ask for more than that. So next question is about mindset during a swim. So I think do you have any techniques to stay sort of focused or relaxed, or what's kind of going through your mind?
So I think it just depends on your goals in part for the race. So mine, when I did Rottnest, was to win. So what kept me engaged was knowing how far I had gone into the race, how long it had taken me, and where I ranked in the pack. So I would have my support crew hold up numbers, or my paddler would tell me when I was taking feed, you're 5k in and you're third female. Yeah. And that would be enough to keep me engaged, but that's because my strategy was to win. Other times I would suggest, like, keeping engaged can be part of your feed strategy, like we talked about earlier. It can also be about doing something fun with your crew at key markers. So we cheered you on a lot and made a lot of noise when you got to 5k, 10k, 12.5k. Having fun with it.
I think that's an important thing. So in my English channel, the guys on the boat, whenever I was struggling, the guys would just try and make me laugh.
Yeah.
They would be sending messages down on a whiteboard, and I think one of them just asked me like fish and chips for dinner, or like, hurry up, the chippy's closing, all these kind of things.
So keep it fun.
Yeah, it keeps it light and like fun, entertaining.
Yeah.
What I would add is, in terms of mindset, you really want to go into this swim as prepared as possible. You don't want to be mid-swim, worrying about certain things, especially if they're outside of your control, or thinking, all right, I've got to do this, It should be second nature, because you know all of the details before going in. So, as an example, when you start the swim, you've got the starting channel that goes for about 500 meters. Have that conversation with your skipper and your paddler where you're going to meet them. I'm going to meet these guys on the south side, for example. So you're not setting off and thinking, oh crap, like,
where am I going?
What am I doing?
Yeah.
It's already set in stone. You know what the drill is, and it's just a case of turning up on the day and executing instead of overthinking.
Yeah.
Because thinking
takes a lot of energy.
Thinking takes energy. So I hardly ever spoke when I was out swimming. I wasn't thinking much. It was just quite a relaxed state. I could focus on my breathing. So if it was getting quite heavy, I would just take deep breaths in and kind of imagine I was breathing out the lactic acid.
Yeah, you just have to really, all the planning you do sets you up for the day, so when you swim, you can just swim.
Yeah. You mentioned about communication with the crew, so what kind of things were they telling you, for example?
So I liked to know how far into the race I was, so 5k in, 7k in, because while there are markers on the race, it can be difficult to see it, or they could say to me, you're 4k in, so then I'd be like, all right, so I should be able to see the 5k boy soon. So those sorts of distance indicators were really helpful for me. They kept me going. I liked to know how long it had taken me, so all right, I'm at 10k and it's taken me 2 hours and 10. That's pretty good in terms of my estimated time and how I wanted to get there. I kept it pretty simple because I didn't want to overload myself with information, but I did want to know some things to keep me engaged.
Yeah. I would just say pretty much the same as that. I wasn't speaking much with my crew. It was all non-verbal with like a whiteboard and whatnot. I would have them hold up little signs that said the distances, or for me, stroke rate's an important thing. So if I'm holding a certain stroke rate, I know roughly what my pace is. And so they might write that on a whiteboard, or there's a little thumbs up like that.
Or we would do this.
Yeah, just simple things to keep you kind of, know where you're tracking and you know you're doing okay.
I think though it's sometimes can be difficult for your boat to do that, because you might get separated and really it's just you and your paddler for a bit when the boat has to maneuver around people, and also it can be quite choppy in the channels. So when you're swimming, while it seems obvious you might be able to see your boat, quite often if your paddler's in the way or another paddler's in the way and your boat's a bit further out and you're on a swell, you might actually not be able to see anything from that your crew are holding up to you, and that happened a few times with us. So that's where your paddler becomes a very crucial resource for a solo swimmer, because often they're the only point of contact that you have with anyone for the whole race.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Your paddler's really your wingman, and it's or wing woman. It's so important to get that person right. You know, they need to be out there. Ideally, you've practiced with them before, and practiced with the paddle craft before, and you know, in all sorts of conditions. Because if they haven't practiced in rough waters, and that's what we get on the Saturday morning, then you know you might be in for quite a rough time. So, and you know, if you are communicating together, you know, you want someone that's going to be, you know, calmly giving you the information, not, you know, shouting or screaming, because that can also have an impact on the swimmer.
Yeah, my solo race and all the other duos and teams and whatnot that I've won or just done really well in, I've always had a really good support person, and my support person was a paddler, one of our friends, Taylor, who did the solo for me. He'd also he'd been a paddler for us for another, I don't know if it was a duo or a team, I can't quite recall, but he was fantastic. There were times where I'd take a feed from him and he'd be like, "You've got this, you're catching the person in front, or you just blew past this other person, or you're looking really good, your stroke's looking good." It's just those small things that were actually so important.
There's such small things, but you know, when it comes to, I mean, I think I read some statistic that said marathon swimming is, I think it was like 80% mental, 20% physical, and I don't know if that's the case, but it obviously is a huge part of the challenge, and you know, little bits of encouragement from your wingman or your wingwoman make a huge difference. You know, on the day. So yeah. Leading on from that, any suggestions on type of kayak?
From my personal experience, I would not recommend a foot-pedaled kayak. And I say that because I was on Andy's support crew for the year you won, and without a paddle, it was a choppy, windy day, and it just made the kayak uncontrollable. And the whole point of a paddler or a support person is to control the swimmer. And so if the paddler or the kayak or the vessel, whatever it is, isn't able to be controlled in battle conditions, we'll have a situation where the swimmer is just blindly following a vessel that actually isn't in control. So because this whole role of the paddler, which we said is critical, the paddler should be ideally relaxed, motivated, have everything under control. If their vessel isn't under control, it can actually impact the race quite significantly. So I would not recommend a pedaled kayak unless there was an ability to really be able to control it.
If they're super experienced with it, then
then that's fine.
So you know, coming back to practicing with your craft of choice, I would steer clear of things like surf skis, because the difference in pace between a surf ski and a swimmer might have a bit of an impact, especially out in rough.
It difficult for the paddler, no matter how experienced, to keep control with them at such a slow pace.
So you know, my kind of recommendation would be like a wide based sea kayak that, you know, can handle those tougher conditions, handle the wind, is comfortable enough for the paddler to sit in, because you know, they could be out there for, you know, quite a few hours under the sun. So,
and also the paddler could just have a break and sit in the kayak and have a stretch, have a drink without tipping over.
That's
something stable and easy to manage at the end of the day.
Perfect. And then another question about teams, so changeover frequency. I think Jay Prashal answered this one on the forum, but yeah, it's really, again, personal preference. I would say, it's a balance between, obviously, the shorter the distance, the higher the intensity you can give in that period of time. So it's just balancing that and other aspects like climbing in and out of the boat, which can be quite fatiguing. So take that into consideration. Take the type of boat into consideration. The swimmers that you have in the team, whether they are better suited to shorter intervals versus people that like a bit of time to like swim into their stroke and get their stride.
And it can also change. So traditionally, when I've done teams, we've had longer periods of swimming at the start, so people could do that swimming in and that warming up. And then when we got closer to shore, we usually bring down that time interval. So for example, it might start at 10-minute intervals or 15-minute intervals in for the first one just to warm up. But then you also find that if it's a cold day, people might get a bit too cold swimming for 15 minutes and then waiting 45 minutes for the next swim. And I was often in that position, so I preferred longer at the start but then shorter. And then by the end, if you're trying to go faster, we'd be down to 5-minute rotations for a bulk of it, and then probably 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. But you do need to factor in the changeover. It's quite tiring. So at the end of the race, do you really want to be doing 1-minute transitions, because it's a lot of getting in and out if you're really fatigued.
Well, you need the boat to be able to maneuver in that position. So
it depends on your goal, right? Like the years I've won it, and that has been the goal. We were doing up to 30-second rotations by the end. You were doing the same the years you've done teams.
Yeah, that's it. So it's the beauty of it is there's no
right or wrong.
There's no right or wrong. You can change it even during the swim.
And you can
adapt have guys, I would do sometimes longer stints than other guys because I've got that endurance aspect to my swimming.
Same.
Where others in the team might not. So, tinker and change.
Or you might get cold during the race and have to change your plan altogether.
You might get someone on the boat that's sick and you have to sit out a few rounds, So, go in with a plan and a rough idea, but be willing to change and be adaptable. All right. That was the main questions that we had. Do you have any last bits of information or tips or bits of advice?
The biggest tip I would give people is on the day, just relax and have fun. I think there's a lot of talk and a lot of anxiety and stress often in the lead up planning things, and you do need to make sure you're meticulously planned. But on the day, just relax and swim. So, for example, last year I did a team, and somehow my bag that I'd packed, so I started from the beach, the bag I'd packed to bring on the boat didn't make it to the boat. And so I got to the boat, I was like, oh great, I had my towel, put my cap on, and I didn't have any of that. And you just have to make do, basically, and it was still a great day. So I think all the prep you can do, you just have to assume that on the day you rock up and you're going to do the race with whatever you've got, whether that's a body with an injury, whether that is a busy week behind you, whether that's an upset stomach or a cramp on the beach. Like you're just going to have to deal with it on the day and just assume that all the preparation you've done up to that point in time is what you've got to work with, and that's it. And that applies to obviously everything we do in life, but that was certainly the mindset I brought with me to all my international races, because on the race day you just want to feel good, you just want to be perfect, and quite often it's never perfect.
And that's it, like things will come up that are unexpected, and hopefully your preparation puts you in a position where you can deal with those unexpected challenges. But I think just echoing what you said, just remember why you're doing this, and that it is such an incredible thing that we have on our shores to be able to do, and it's not everywhere that you have this amazing event where thousands of people swim out to an island 20 kilometres off the coast. So,
and thank your paddler, thank your support crew. It's a big day for everyone.
That's it. It's fun. If you're doing a solo, that's the first rule of thumb. It's not really a solo because it's a team effort. there's so many people contributing to that success. So be grateful for that. Make sure that you look after those guys too, because they are such an
They're mission critical.
They are such an important part of
Yeah.
the whole process. So,
Yeah.
well, I think we'll round things up there, but hopefully some of that has been helpful and of use.
Hopefully.
And yeah, best of luck for this year's Rottnest Channel Swim, and we'll hopefully
See you over
see
there.
you over there. See you later, guys.
Bye.